In this video, I'm going to be talking more about my experience with the Cammus direct drive wheelbase and also the Cammus GT1 load cell pedals that I've been using for quite a while now, and quite simply, I love it. The wheelbase in particular, and I'll get to the pedals in a little while, but let's talk about the wheelbase first. And just before we get started, if you are interested in picking up your own Cammus gear, then be sure to use the code DOVE in the checkout for an extra 5% discount, and it also supports me too, so I'd be very appreciative of that, and you also get a 5% discount. So here we are in the cockpit of the Porsche 911 GT3 Cup car, which is what I've mostly been driving lately on iRacing. If you didn't see my recent YouTube post, not too long ago I qualified for the Let's Play Live Samsung iRacing NZ Cup, which is a New Zealand championship, which is happening very soon. Actually, this coming Wednesday I'll be live streaming at 7 PM New Zealand time. I think that's 6 AM GMT. You could convert that. I'll probably have some extra times on the screen if you want to tune in live to see me race. Anyway, onto the topic of the video. We're starting off with the wheelbase and the wheel. They're both separate products, by the way. We have the wheelbase and the steering wheel itself, which can be bought separately or together in a bundle. And if you didn't see my initial review with this wheelbase, then you could see the link above my head there, or I'll leave it in the description so you could go watch that. And my impressions so far with this wheelbase have been really good. And in that last video, I mentioned that I wasn't quite satisfied with the quick release. There was a bit of a wobble, and there is, you might still be able to see it, there's a very, very slight side-to-side wobble, which you don't notice at all when you're driving. And before, I had this issue where there was like a bit of a clunk or a click in the center when you're transitioning from left into a right turn. There was like a click in the middle, and I thought that was the quick release, and that was not correct. One thing which I'll show a close-up on the screen right now. There are these screws on top of the steering wheel shaft. If you do get the Cammus wheelbase, before you use it, I would recommend to take those little rubbery bits out and make sure you tighten up those screws inside. By making sure those screws are tight, you're ensuring that the wheel is nice, sturdy and secure, and that way you won't get any of that clicking in the middle. That was a bit of an issue I had before, and after talking a little bit with Cammus, I got that sorted out. The wheel feels absolutely incredible, and I don't have many negative things to say about it anymore. So I'm actually going to do a little bit of driving here while I'm talking. You'll hear a bit of the pedals in the background. I'm sorry if that's a little annoying, but the pedals themselves are actually, they're not too heavy, like you might get on some other products, but I personally don't mind it at all. It gives me enough of a click to know that I've gone into gear, same with the downshifts. And if there is any sort of negative, I would say that for some people, maybe the gear or the pedal shifts are a little bit too light. Some people prefer more of a firm click in the hand, more of a solid feeling. But to me, that hasn't been too much of a worry. There has been an occasion or two where I've accidentally rested my fingers a little too hard onto the pedals and I've accidentally upshifted, but that's a very rare occurrence and something that doesn't really happen. And on the steering wheel rim itself, you'll see that these colored buttons. When you press them, I'll just turn the pit limiter on. You might not see it, might not come across well in the video, but these buttons actually lighten up when you press them. Not too effective if you've got a light room, you don't really see it, and also the fact that your finger kind of covers the button when you press on it, you don't really see the lighting up effect. But if you're in a darker room, you do kind of see the glow towards the outside, ensuring that you've pressed that button. And those buttons themselves aren't the highest of quality button, they don't have much of a solid click to them, but they do the job, and I don't really have any complaints there. I'm not going to be driving too competitively just for now. I'm trying to get my thoughts out while we drive here, but I think it's nice to feel the wheel as I'm driving so I can bring up all my opinions about the wheelbase. And I'm just completely satisfied with how smooth the steering wheel or the wheelbase experience is compared to what I've experienced in the past. I've driven the Logitech wheelbases, the gear driven ones. I've driven on the Thrustmaster belt driven wheel and a SimMagic M10, which is a direct drive as well, but it's got like a stepper motor, which means you can actually feel the very subtle steps within the motor as you're driving. I mean, you don't really notice it while you're driving, but when the wheel starts slipping out your hand, you're correcting oversteer, or if you're drifting and the wheel's spinning a lot, on that SimMagic wheelbase, it was quite noisy. On this Cammus wheelbase that we have here, there's absolutely no sound at all when you're swinging the steering wheel from side to side. If you're drifting, it's a completely smooth experience. There's no stepping, notching at all within the wheelbase. I've taken part in a 24-hour race, 24 hours of Spa on iRacing a couple months back with this wheelbase, and that was still when I hadn't sorted out the tightness of the steering wheel. It was actually a little bit loose then, but apart from that, my experience has been amazing with it. It lasted perfectly throughout that race. The only thing I might say is that after a lot of use with this wheel, like if you do a long stint using the wheelbase, You will hear the fans going off quite a bit after your usage. Obviously, if you're using headphones, you're not going to hear that. If you're not wearing headphones, it'll be a lot more evident though. But yeah, the smoothness of this wheel and the fact that I'm only getting purely the force feedback that the game's delivering me, all the information that I need to know what the car is doing, it gives me a complete confidence in the car that I'm driving to know what I should be doing at all times. And it's really useful in those long endurance races where you need that confidence. You need to know what the car's doing, especially if your mind drifts off a little bit, that the force feedback will keep you awake. And yeah, 15 Newton meters of force feedback, there's plenty of force to play with, and I can't give an exact number because I'm not completely sure, but I think I'm running around 60%, 50 to 60% force feedback at the moment, and that's about where the most I'm going to run. Any more than this and then your arms are going to get way too tight unless you're super buff. One feature I've not really used at all on the Cammus wheelbase are the actual, you're not going to see it too well, but there are buttons on the wheelbase itself and a couple, I think, rotary dials are there. Yep, there's a couple rotary dials. I completely forgot about them because I haven't even been using them, because what is on the steering wheel face is more than enough for what I generally do in sim racing. I've got the 2 rotary dials on the face here, which I use for my traction control and my brake bias. And then I've got the buttons for things such as the pit limiter, the flashing of headlights if I ever need it, and whatever else is useful. And then you got your toggle switches. One's a momentary toggle switch and the other one's an on and off with the middle position as well. So most of the functions that you'll generally need, most of the buttons and switches you'll need for sim racing are already on the steering wheel itself. But you do have those extra options for more settings on the wheelbase with those extra buttons, rotary dials and switches. And the build quality on the wheelbase and the steering wheel itself is really, really good. I've got almost no complaints. There's a slight seam along the faceplate just alongside the carbon fiber. Almost no complaints whatsoever, just those plastic buttons on the top there, but you're not going to put them through too much wear and tear. They're perfectly fine for what the wheel's used for. And for the price of this wheelbase, which you can get 5% off using my code, by the way, like I said at the start of the video, the $500 USD price tag is incredible. It's amazing value for what this is. You get a very functional, almost all that you ever gonna need, direct drive wheelbase. That is just the wheelbase, by the way. You don't get the wheel with that. That'll be an extra price on top of that. Highly recommended to anybody that purely does PC sim racing, not console racing, because this isn't compatible. You're going to need an extra adapter for that. A lot of these things that I have already mentioned in my initial review video, but I'm going over that again just so everybody knows. And another thing I'm going to mention, it's a comparison with the SimMagic M10 direct drive wheelbase that I've driven before. That wheelbase, one thing I noticed is, I'm talking about the SimMagic wheelbase, is that over curbs and bumps, the force feedback can be very spiky at times. Like if for example, over here, I could go over the dirt a little bit, it'll be very spiky. And this being Road Atlanta, I've chosen this particular combination because it's probably one of the hardest combinations there is, the Porsche Cup car, no assists, and you've got one of the most difficult cornering sections in sim racing and motorsport in general, coming up the hill to a blind turn after turn 1 here, coming up the hill, and you get to these curbs that you kind of have to cut over to get the most out of your lap time. Like this one right here, you're bouncing over the curb, using the inside curb here. And back onto my point, with the SimMagic M10 wheelbase, I found the force feedback to be incredibly spiky. As soon as I got up onto one of these curbs, the forces were shaking my hands all about. And even when adjusting the settings on that wheelbase, I couldn't quite tune that spikiness out. I'm not trying to bash on the SimMagic wheelbase because that is also a really good wheelbase. But I'm not getting that spikiness with the Cammus wheelbase, and I'm really enjoying that. It makes the experience a bit more tame, it makes it more drivable, because that spikiness can really throw you off, and I think it's a bit unnecessary. I think that's all the main comments out the way on the steering wheel. My thoughts are, I'm just really impressed with the wheelbase. There's an AI making a genuine spin off the track, it looks like there. I think I'm going to be quite well satisfied and happy with this wheelbase for a long time to come. As long as I'm on the PC, when I go to Gran Turismo, I'm going to have to be whipping out the old Logitech again or finding something else. And yes, Cammus have provided me with this gear to show you guys, but I'm genuine when I say that this is a wheelbase I'm going to be sticking with for a very long time to come. There's really not all that much out there that beats this level of quality for the price tag. And even the leather and the stitching on the steering wheel, I've been putting this wheel through quite a lot of use, and everything's holding up really nicely. There's no damage, there's nothing wearing out on me. And as always, if you guys have any questions or comments about the steering wheel or the wheelbase itself, then be sure to leave your comments in the comment section below. Also, same with the pedals that I'm about to talk about. And now to do a little bit of talking about the Cammus GT1 pedals, which we have here just on screen. Cammus sent these over a bit more recently, but I have had plenty of time to drive, get used to them, and find the sweet spot of where I feel is the most comfortable position, particularly on the brake pedal. But before I do some more driving with these pedals, I'm going to talk about a couple of the issues I had with these pedals. And firstly, I'm going to mention the mounting on the brake pedal, both the clutch and the throttle. They are perfectly fine. You can just screw them into place on the base plate. With the brake pedal, well, the rear side of the brake pedal where you mount it to the base plate, you actually have to remove the brake shaft so you can fit the screw in there and fit an Allen key in to tighten it up. So that's just a little bit of an inconvenience. You have to get it apart and put it back together again, make sure you've got it all in the right positions. And that wasn't too bad, but it is kind of fiddly to get that out and in place correctly again, and you might need a second person to give you a hand. And the second minor issue with the pedals on delivery was that they were all quite rough to the touch, so you press them down, they all had quite a rough feeling. It's easily fixable as long as you've got some grease around. You just need to grease up each pedal shaft, and then they feel alright. That removes any of the sounds that might come from when you press on the pedals and the roughness. I've now got all the shafts all properly lubed up, and they all feel nice and smooth now, which I'm happy about. And before we get into what I like about the pedals, I'll cover the main issue I've had with these pedals, which is the flickering that you get, particularly with the brake pedal. If we look at the pedal inputs on the iRacing menu screen here, we can see the throttle is quite a smooth application, same with the clutch pedal all the way up to 100%. But when we press on the brake pedal, I'm going to hold it at a steady around 70%. You can see it starts flickering up and down like that, and initially I wasn't too happy with it, but with a little bit of fiddling of the settings, like the brake force factor here on iRacing, I've set it up to 1.27. that kind of adjusts the linearity of the brake pedal. So with that brake adjustment made, the flickering is not so evident in the lower values of the brake pedal. As you press it a little harder, it will become a bit more noticeable, but still it's not that bad, and when you're driving it doesn't really affect you at all. So if you do happen to buy these pedals, or if you have any pedal set that has this kind of flickering, fiddle with that brake force factor, the linearity of the brake pedal. It could be on any sim, because pretty much all sims have this sensitivity or this linearity adjustment, and you'll have a little bit less flickering going on in your trail braking zone, which I think is the most important part of your braking. The load cell sensors do seem to be quite sensitive, so this is probably a part of the reason. But with my adjustments made, I've not had too many issues while driving. And the other adjustments that I've made are the physical adjustments on the pedal itself. They've got different slots that you can put the brake shaft into. I found the settings which feel about most comfortable to me, and I've also adjusted the spring preload behind the pedal itself, which I've got to a nice point where the spring is not too stiff and not too soft. So you'll see as I press onto the brake pedal here, there's a little bit of movement. That is the spring we're pressing on, what I call the soft range. And then as we hit the end of the spring's range, we'll hit a stop, and then the rest of the range is on the rubbers, which are stiff rubbers sitting behind the spring, and that will give you the rest of the range up to 100%. And I have this set up pretty much perfectly for iRacing, and in iRacing the braking is really important, especially the initial application of the brake pedal. You don't want to go much beyond 70-80% in iRacing, otherwise you end up locking up or hitting the ABS. So I've got the soft range set to about 70-80%, and then after that, if I really need to go a bit harder, use a little bit more brake force, I can press harder and get the most out of it. And after quite a bit of driving with the Cammus GT1 pedals now, I've been finding them super comfortable. I'm really consistent with them, and I don't really find myself wanting to change anything about it as of right now. The clutch pedal is a linear feel. It's pretty much exactly the same as the throttle. It doesn't have that bite point feel that the Fanatec V3 pedals do. And the overall brake pedal quality is not quite up there the same as the Fanatec V3s. But with their price of $300 USD, I think these are really well worth their value. You just need to grease up the pedals, make sure they're nice and smooth, then you can adjust them to your liking, the actual positioning of the pedals, the springs and whatever, and then I think they are a really solid set of pedals. Like I said earlier, I'm going to be competing in the Let's Play Live New Zealand iRacing Championship this coming week with this equipment. I'm really looking forward to it because it gives me good confidence. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go out, I'm going to do a hot lap after I get this out lap done. We'll do a bit of a push lap with both the wheelbase and the pedals. I know you don't quite get the greatest view on the pedals right now, but that's just the best angle I can really get at the moment without getting really finicky with my camera positioning. But I hope this does help inform you a little bit more about the Cammus Direct Drive wheelbase and the pedals. which I'm both really enjoying, and I'm looking forward to seeing what other products Cammus produce in the future. Okay, so we're coming up to the final chicane to begin our hot lap here. Now, it's the first sector of this track which really is the tricky stuff, and which this equipment gives me full confidence in attacking, so we'll see how that goes. Also, the track is extremely hot, so we might not have all the grip in the world, but we'll make do with what we've got. And hopefully no AI will come out the pits on the exit of turn 1 and ruin my lap, but we'll see how it goes. Up to the first turn we come, got to do a lot of trail braking here to get to the apex nicely. Down to 4th gear, there we go, make the apex, begin accelerating, up the hill we go. And now the blind crests of the next couple turns here, got to hop the curb, not getting off track. There we go, up to 4th gear using the inside curb. Force feedback telling us we've got plenty of grip, so we just attack it. Got to have the little lift there, there's not enough grip to make us through flat there. Using all the curbs here, opening up all our entry lines. I could have got that one a little bit better, all over the bumps there, but we're still facing forward and that's important. Up to the little curvy uphill turn here. 3rd gear, got to start accelerating at the apex, get up onto the curb. 2nd gear, be extra slow here, don't go use too much curb because you'll bounce up and down and lose all your traction on exit, but I can feel it all and I'm comfortable on throttle coming out the exit onto the main back straight here. This is such a long one, but we've got to think about where we're braking for the final chicane, because that one's really important. If you brake too late and don't brake hard enough, you'll go flying off into the grass. So this is where I'm going to go into that hard zone on the brake pedal, using all of the brake force up to 100%, slowing down. 3rd gear, actually could go down to 2nd gear to get a little bit more rotation. I could have actually attacked that a little bit harder. Plenty of traction, just clipping the grass there on exit. Final turn, here we go, using a little bit of this inside curve, hop over it, there we go, shorter turn. And 121, not the best time I've done around here, but still fairly decent enough hot lap while I'm busy commentating about how the Cammus wheelbase feels, and I'm quite well and truly satisfied. I get full confidence, particularly through this difficult first sector. The way the car gets tossed around all over these curbs, it's insane, especially this left-hander here. I remember driving through here, I think it was in GT4 cars with the Logitech. It's almost impossible to tell when the rear wants to just swing around on that. Going through that turn on this wheelbase, I can easily tell if the car's going to let go or not, and I'm ready to correct it if it needs to be done. And that little exit of the S is just there. When you're bouncing all over the curb, you need to know what the car's doing so you can be prepared to correct if needed. So having that extra force feedback on any kind of direct drive wheelbase is always really useful for those kind of situations. The directness of it, the response is really quick. And so finally, how do I rate the wheelbase and the pedals? Well, the wheelbase I'm incredibly impressed by, and for its price tag of 500 USD, there is really not that much that's going to beat this. This wheelbase is so smooth, it's got plenty of force. You're never going to need more than the 15 Newton meters that this wheelbase produces. I've not driven the Fanatec direct drives before, they're generally like the standard when it comes to direct drives, but my experience with the Cammus direct drive wheelbase is nothing short of amazing. The brake pedals at $300. They are not quite the level of the Fanatec V3s, but remember the Fanatec V3s are also more expensive. And I think for the price that they are valued at, these Cammus GT1 pedals, they are worth the price. And I think once you have them set up to your liking, the feel of them, and have them greased up, they're a really good set of pedals and will have you feeling confident while driving on the track, especially with cars without ABS. And I think that's my biggest comment with load cell pedals in general. I remember when I was pretty new to sim racing with the Logitech pedals, just potentiometers, coming into the braking zones, particularly the first turn on the Daytona road course, coming into that turn with a car without ABS, I was always locking up into there, and I would always think to myself, how are these other guys actually getting through this corner consistently? And some people are just insane with their throttle, their brake control, and I eventually got used to it. But I was always on the edge, just scared I was going to lock up every time on those pedals. And ever since driving on iRacing with load cell pedals, both the Fanatec V3s and the Cammus GT1 pedals, I have full confidence going into there that I can control my brake inputs enough to not lock up. And I never feel scared that I'm going to go flying deep into a turn through it because of a lockup. So thank you all for watching my video here on the Cammus direct drive wheelbase, the GT1 wheel and the Cammus GT1 pedals. I would really highly recommend them if you're looking to upgrade or even get into sim racing with a new wheelbase and pedals. And just remember, if you are looking to buy your own Cammus setup, then use the code DOVE, like I said earlier in the video, at the checkout, and you'll get an extra 5% off, which can be quite a saving and it helps me out, so be sure to do that. A massive thank you again to Cammus for allowing me to use the direct drive wheelbase and the GT1 pedals. I hope that I can experience more in the future. Take care guys, and I'll see you later.